Welcome to TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed. This podcast is about your work as a caring professional and the ideas we can share to elevate and expand what we do to ensure that all those we serve get the best of what we have to offer. My name is Dr. Tim Grivois, Executive Director of TGS Educational Consulting. I'm excited to introduce Superintendent Brent Hoesing to the show. Dr. Brent Hoesing is in his first year as Superintendent of Schools of Lewis Central Community School District in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Prior to this, Dr. Brent spent 13 years as a teacher, coach, principal, activities director, and superintendent in Missouri Valley, Iowa. Prior to that, Dr. Brent was a business teacher, coach, and play director at Shelton Public Schools in Nebraska, and a special education paraeducator, summer custodian, and coach in Coleridge and Laurel, Nebraska. Dr. Brent comes from a family of educators with a brother and a father who are both current superintendents in Nebraska. Brent's mother was a high school language arts and drama teacher. Brent also has a sister who is a speech pathologist and another sister who is a third grade teacher. Dr. Brent is married to Jenna, an early childhood and literacy consultant, and together they have 3 daughters, Rylan, Reese, and Raleigh. Brent earned his undergrad, master's, and specialist degrees, as well as played golf at Wayne State College in Wayne, Nebraska, and earned his EDD from the University of South Dakota. When he's not leading learning, you can find Dr. Brent spending time with family and friends and getting in as much fishing and golf as he can. Dr. Brent, did I get that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show. And everyone, I invited Brent on the show today to talk about what it's like to lead a school district in America's heartland. Brent, I've been to Iowa a few times, and I have to be honest, I'm going to reveal how little I know about your amazing state. But one of the things I know is that getting a teaching job in Iowa is real hard because you got great teachers there, for sure. And I remember how much fun I had at a county fair. I remember vast tracts of farmland covered in corn and soy. And beyond that, I don't really know a lot about what it's like to do the work that you do, where you do. And I'm absolutely certain that there's huge aspects of your leadership that apply anywhere. And, all of my school leadership really has been in pretty big urban areas. And even here in Tucson, we're still a fairly big city by Arizona standards. And so I'm wondering, what might you want to talk about as a superintendent of a great school district in Iowa that perhaps, what is it that maybe nobody gets right about what it's like to lead a school district in a place as amazing as Iowa?
Yep. And I would say probably the thing that I belong to a couple national superintendent groups, and this question gets posed to me once in a while from superintendents from Georgia and Washington, D.C. and, Las Vegas. And one of the things that I say is, we have the same issues everybody else does. Right now, staffing is a huge issue. We do have a lot of really talented individuals, talented teachers here. We still have openings. I still have an elementary opening. And that's weird because it used to be that for an elementary classroom teacher opening, we would have 50 to 60 applicants. And now I've had it open for the last month and I have 4. So it's just very odd. It's just kind of a different time. Things are changing. We're all competing over the same small pool of individuals. We have teachers, kind of going from district to district to see who's able to compensate better. And I don't blame them at all. At the end of the day, they have to do what's best for them. But at the end of, we also need to be able to find talented staff to take care of our students. We also have, the same issues everybody else does with trying to figure out funding, trying to decide how best to educate our students through the adoption of curriculum and instructional strategies. We are dealing with the same social, emotional, mental health crisis that everybody else is dealing with right now. Safety is a huge issue. And probably one of the biggest threats to education right now is just our political climate, regardless of whether you're in the Midwest or the East Coast or West Coast. I think that our politicians right now are not doing us any favors in the public education or just education in general, realm. They're figuring out ways to underfund. They are trying to pit public and private schools against each other when at the end of the day, it's really about collaboration and trying to figure out how we can be successful. They are painting a picture that educators are these evil people. And at the end of the day, we're not. We're your neighbors. We are the same people that taught you when you were little. Things really haven't changed. And so I think that that's where a lot of people, as far as politicians, that's where they get it wrong, because they want to paint us as something we're not. And what we are is we are individuals who love kids and who are trying to figure out how to best serve kids and how to do so on a ever declining budget that's not keeping up with inflation. And so it's just been interesting. So we are in the same kind of boat as everybody else.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's just really beautiful to share, to think about it, is that here I am, like, looking for some, like, just different perspectives from different folks in different regions in the country. And what you're saying is that really, by and large, what I'm hearing from every single school that I work with, every superintendent that I work with and know, every principal that I work with and know, what had been my own experience as a school principal here in Tucson and in Illinois, is exactly the same. We have to get our arms around just a huge amount of social and emotional learning, a whole bunch of mental health needs, a whole bunch of funding things. Back when I could, the challenge in hiring was, how am I going to get through 100 applicants for this fourth grade position? And now the challenge is, how am I going to find any applicant for this fourth grade position? It's a very different kind of situation to be in. And one of the things that you said really caught my attention. I'm wondering if we could talk a bit more about it. Is I don't remember as a student, or even as I started my career in education, almost 20 years ago at this point, that there really was a Republican or a Democrat way to teach a child to read. Like, I don't remember that there was any difference politically in how to help a child learn to pursue a long division algorithm correctly. Like, that didn't seem to be something that anyone was interested in talking about, and now it is. And yet you're also talking about that, we've got public and private schools. We're having this conversation as though we're somehow on opposite sides of something, but we're really not. We really aren't. Never have been here. How do you see those kind of bridges back to this is our community, these are our students? What are some things that perhaps you're seeing as maybe opportunities to start building bridges back to each other?
And that's the difficult thing, because until we can fix the political climate, this adversarial feeling, I don't know if we can. I mean, I have a good relationship with we have a couple private schools here in town, and we have a good individual relationship with them, but it's harder to try to figure out how we can work together when everybody's pushing us towards this. Oh, well, you have to go against the private school, and you have to, because now they're getting our dollars, and now they're, everybody's talking about the public schools as being so terrible, and the private schools are they're so great, and so we can't be helping them out. And at the end of the day, though, it's all about education. Like, we just want to make sure we educate people correctly. I do find it interesting, and I've had these conversations with not only local legislators, but our federal legislators as well, is just saying, when you talk about public schools as failing students, and people a lot of times will say, well, look at the scores. Okay, I don't. But what do the scores tell? Because
that's a whole different podcast, right? But
it does, But that's the thing, is you look at the scores, but at the same time, who do they think are teaching public schools? Like, the public school teachers come from, a lesser college than the private school teachers? Do the private school, And at the end of the day, no. Like, we all went to Wayne State College, we all went to Iowa State, we all went to University of Phoenix. We all went to, like, whatever it is, we all went to the same places. And I think that is what's, almost comical about this whole situation. When you talk about how the schools are differing, and you talk about curriculum, well, they don't teach that. Are you sure? Because last time I checked, they're using the same curriculum that we are. In fact, the local Catholic school here in town is using the same social emotional learning curriculum that we are. The only difference is we call it social emotional learning, and they call it Walk with Jesus. And so I was joking with the local legislator, and I said, because he's like, well, you cannot use social emotional learning anymore. I said, I can't. I said, well, the local school is using the same curriculum. So what if I changed it to Walk with Jesus? Would that be okay? And he's like, you can't do that. You're a public school. And I said, it's the same stuff. It's the same curriculum. There's no difference. But for whatever reason, and we've been doing social emotional learning since the very beginning of education, teaching people how to be nice to each other, teaching people how to, cope and react and work with each other and make friendships and, navigate tough situations. We've been doing it since the very beginning. All of a sudden, that's not appropriate, but it's not appropriate because of the actions. I've asked I asked legislators, like, when we talk about this, are you okay with us teaching kids to get along? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are you okay with us teaching kids that, these are some coping mechanisms that you can use? Oh, for sure, absolutely. I said, are you okay with us calling it social emotional learning? No. So I said, so it's the title. It's
Yeah.
the title that gets you. For whatever reason, the title, social emotional learning, is not acceptable. So that's fine. Just we'll call it something else, maybe walk like Tim, whatever it is, we'll
Well,
change the
I
name
mean, I can
and
see
we'll
I've
keep
done a
it.
lot of that social emotional learning work for sure, but I'm not quite ready to write the Walk with Tim curriculum necessarily, or you don't need to use my
Yeah.
face on it. But I hear what you're saying though, and what you're actually talking about, I think is the first time I've actually heard a legitimate way to start building this bridge back to each other, wherever each other happens to be in this. And it's one of those things where I've made it my point to make sure that I am friends with people who I would never vote for, like on purpose. Like some of the people that I say I love you at the end of every phone call to now are folks that we do not agree on nearly anything that is actually my life's work and education. But we understand each other in a very different kind of way. And what I'm hearing from you is perhaps a version of that where what there is considerable common ground here. I mean, at the very
Chris.
least, we can agree that we are at least trying to sort out what's the best way to do things for kids. At the very least, we can agree that we're starting there. And a lot of times, when people have a better sense of what we're actually kind of together on already, then I don't know. I have to be honest. I'm the first person, and as especially as a person who's been doing PBIS training for years at this point, I'm the first person. I don't really care what you call it. I don't care if you call it values matrix. I don't care if it's even called PBIS. All we're really doing right here is just coming to some general agreements on what values we want kids to live out loud, and how are we going to recognize them when they do it. That's really all we're doing.
Right.
And it
Right.
matters zero to me what we call it. It just matters to me that you have a way of doing it.
Right.
And that I'm wondering, like, how might that work with, I don't know, just about anything else that seems to be going on. Just I think it just seems like I just kind of remember the non-issue about critical race theory, which I've never seen ever taught ever anywhere in any classroom I've ever been
No,
my entire career, ever. And yet
no.
there's like bills in the Arizona state legislature to make sure it never happens.
How
I'm
about kitty litter boxes?
oh,
Are you guys,
okay.
have you heard of kitty litter boxes?
It's the kitty litter boxes. Like, for goodness sake,
Yeah, I just
I'm
like kitty
trying to
litter.
tell my friends in Arizona this is not
Yeah,
a thing. Or if it
yeah,
is a thing, it's in a completely different context that has his own
right,
podcast about, right?
right.
It's just not happening, y'all. And yeah, so I mean, perhaps when we've gone to kitty litter boxes, I don't know, right? I don't know, right? But perhaps when we're thinking about like the kind of the non-issue with critical race theory, that I don't know, do you have a critical race theory curriculum at Council Bluffs?
No,
Like, nobody does. No
no, and
one
that's
does.
oh, I know. But what's so funny about it? Again, it's just the narrative, and I love having
Yeah.
conversations with people about it because I had an individual call me one time, an older individual, and he says, "Hey," he goes, "Are you teaching that CRT?" And I said, "You mean critical race theory?" And he's like, "Yeah, you better not be teaching that." And I said, "Why not? Why shouldn't we teach that? I just want to know." And he's like, "Well, because that's you're teaching white kids. It's so that they need to hate themselves." I said, "Oh," I said, "We must have a substantially different thought process about what critical race theory is." And I said, "Because that's not at all what I believe it is." And he goes, "Well, I just want to make sure because it's brand new." And I said, "Oh, do you mean like so this is different than the critical race theory that was developed in the 80s as a
Yeah.
more of a college curriculum that they were utilizing?" And he's like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, it was actually developed in the 80s. It's not brand new, not at all." But I said, obviously you're concerned about it. And I said, "Can I ask you a question though?" I said, "How should we be teaching kids, that these things are issues? Like, should we giving them two sides of issues and then allowing them to make a decision, or should we say this is the only way it is, and so this is what kids need to believe?" "No, you have to give them two sides of the story." And I said,
At
"Okay, so I
least.
get two sides of the story." So, like, let's say, for instance, and it was funny as I know this individual, and this individual is kind of a conspiracy theorist guy. So I know he's like a flat earther and those types of things. And I was like, so let me think about this. So if I have to, teach kids, we should tell them that there is a flat earth and there's a round earth, and we should let them make their own decision. He goes, absolutely. And I said, okay, evolution. We should teach them that, we evolved and that God plopped us all here on earth and we should allow them to make their decision. Absolutely. And I said, okay. I said, so we should teach them that our government is biased towards one race and it's not biased at all. Well, no, I said, no, there's no two ways about it. I said, I'm not saying we are doing that, but what I'm saying is there is a belief out there that people should know both sides. We should think about both sides, have the conversation, and allow our students to make their own decision. Anyway, so I just think that is where, all of this kind of representation of political thoughts, like this is really what it is people are just having complete misunderstanding of what these terms are, and then the politicians are using them, as ways to get at each other, red and blue. But at the end of the day, they're having unintended consequences of really affecting what it is we're doing on a daily basis. And so that's one of the things I try to get across to, and that's probably the biggest conversation that comes up, regardless of who I'm talking to across the nation. It doesn't matter where you're at, but all of us are kind of talking about the same thing, about how do we get these thoughts out of people's heads, and how do we get back to just being able to teach ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Like that's what we want to do, and helping kids and providing career pathways. There are so many amazing things going on in education right now that I would have never thought of as when I was in high school. You can now leave with certificates and apprenticeships and 2-year degrees, and in some cases almost a 4-year degree. You can leave with all these things. You can decide in high school you can have more internships than you can possibly handle. Our kids at an early age are learning how to self-cope and how to plan for their future and how to do all these different things. And the technology in general is just amazing. So we have all these awesome things going on, and everybody wants to focus on these non-issues. And so that's where I just think, how do we get around to back to just really talking about things that matter? Like I want to talk about the science of reading. I want to talk about, these partnerships with community colleges and other organizations to make sure that when every kid leaves school, that they have a plan and they know what they want to do and they know what they want to be, or at least have an idea, But instead, we're so hyper focused on litter boxes that it's driving me crazy.
Let's fix the litter box problem first, and then we can talk about career and military readiness and all of the college career and military.
I know,
of course,
yeah.
And it has to be, and I can hear it in your voice, just like it just like, am I really spending so much time in my leadership practice discussing litter boxes? And so, you know what, that's actually really, I think, a good time for us to take a break. And let's go ahead and take a quick break. And then when we come back, let's talk about that. Like how might we flip that script a bit? Like what might be some opportunities we have, like validating that frustration? Because I'll tell you what, I thought, let's talk about Iowa a bit. But what I'm hearing is, no, let's talk about what every single superintendent in the nation is dealing with right now. And I love it that you redirected this conversation in that way. So let's take a quick break, and then
hijacked it. I'm sorry.
No. Hey, that's I seriously, I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I had a hunch that we were going to have a great conversation today, Dr. Brent. So let's go ahead. Let's take that quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about a bit. Like, okay, here's where we are, where we have superintendents talking about litter boxes that do not exist, or at least if they do, they don't exist for anywhere close to the reason why people think they do. And how might we start flipping the script to say, hey, you could graduate from a high school in Iowa with an apprenticeship that's going to get you a $20 an hour job minimum. And like those are the things those are the stories that need to get told. And why that's really interesting to me right now is I just put up a podcast about just storytelling and school leaders doing storytelling. And this might actually get concrete and practical and useful in a really neat way when we come back. All right, so let's take a quick break, and we'll come back. We'll be back in just a bit. Youth on Their Own is a local nonprofit that supports the high school graduation and continued success of Pima County youth experiencing homelessness. Since its founding in 1986, Youth on Their Own has helped thousands of young people graduate from high school and pursue their dreams. If you'd like to get involved, consider donating to Yodo's Mini Mall. Starting now, Yoda will be collecting food, hygiene products, and school supplies to help homeless youth in our community. If you'd like to make a financial contribution, don't forget that all donations to Yoto are tax deductible, and if you live in Arizona, eligible for the Arizona Charitable Tax Credit. For more information, go to yoto.org or follow Yoto on Facebook or Instagram. Right now, what are some of like your more like things that you can do to like lead with integrity, but perhaps not spend every minute on litter boxes? Like what are some of those things that you do?
Right. Yeah, and I would say, excuse me. I would say probably the biggest thing is just being willing to have the conversation. I know too many superintendents that they're just so tired of it that they just want to shut it off. But I guess maybe I have a little more energy left, like just a little bit. And so I'm not like, I'm the guy that I see somebody posting on Facebook and I'm like, I wonder if anybody can give me their number, and I call up and say, hey, you may, as I understand it, somebody reported that you may have a misunderstanding about something. Like, can we have a conversation about it? Can I explain it to you? Can we talk about it? Can you come visit? Will you sit down with me face to face so we can have the conversation? Will you come visit, walk through our hallways? I'll show you there's no litter boxes. I just did this recently with again, an older individual who called in and he's like, hey, are you teaching SEL? And I said, social emotional learning. And he's like, yeah. And I said, every day. We teach it every single day. And he's like, I can't believe it. I told people at coffee that there's no way you guys are teaching that. And I said, what? I said, do we have a misunderstanding of what social emotional learning is? And he goes, well, you're teaching boys to wear dresses. And I said,
no, we are not.
No, we're not. We teach boys that if other boys decide to wear a dress, we're going to be nice to them. Like, we're just like, basically, is what we teach is like, be nice. Like, if a boy decides to wear a dress, then we're just going to say, and I said, because at the end of the day, like, if it's not bothering us, why should we be dictating what other people are doing? We should just be nice. And he's like, well, yeah, that's okay. And I said, okay, yeah, that's social emotional learning. And he's like, oh, well, you're teaching kids that, and I said, no, that's all we're teaching them. It's just that, just be nice. Like, doesn't matter if a boy's wearing a dress or a girl's wearing slacks or, they got two dads or two moms or they don't have any parents. They just live with grandparents. So they live with aunt and uncles or they live with like family structures are who you live with. Like that's who you love. That's who you want to be. That's who makes you better. So that's what we talk about. We just said, who cares? Because at the end of the day, family structures have been different for generations, for forever. And nobody's really wanted to talk about it, And so now we're having the conversation for the first time. There's always been two dads or two moms, but it's always been like a hush hush thing. Well, now we're just like recognizing it as a normal thing. Like that is just a normal thing. And at the end of the day, it's none of your business. It isn't none of your business. And I said, but that's all we're doing. And he's just like, oh. I said, just like it's nobody else's business what you do, when you're off time. Nobody's going to start dictating, why isn't he working? Lazy guy is at coffee. I said, you go to coffee because you want to go to coffee. And he's like, oh, okay. I said, so that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. Like, that's what we talk about.
Let's have that conversation. I'll show you, all school, because you got four schools.
What's that?
Yeah. How many school sites you got in California?
We have four. Four.
Yeah, you got the four. I'll take any one of the four you want, and we can go on a litter box safari if you want. And
yeah,
I'm just letting you know it's going to be tricky because we ain't got none. So that's just how it'll be. And because I think what's important about that is like there's that dance between kind of drawing some professional boundaries about what, I've answered your question, I'm not going to talk about it twice because I've explained, but then that other side of it of you know what, lean into it. Let's go lean into it. Let's have this conversation because it's kind of like you choose not to. I kind of think like that person at that faculty meeting who is like, if you choose not to address their concern that they've been wanting to share at every single meeting since the start of the year and choose to ignore it, it just gets louder until it just bursts out in a completely horrible way. So you may as well just catch that hand grenade and hold it close to your right away, right? So.
Well, but we also have to, yeah, exactly that. Because I tell people all the time, and I tell my other people in my profession, I'm like, listen, like they're always kind of surprised that I've had those kind of conversations with people. Like I had an individual who she posted on social media that all the things we weren't doing about bullying, this is, they're terrible and they never do anything about bullying. And I said, so I called her up and I said, hey, let's talk about bullying. Let's talk about this for a second, because I think there's some misconceptions again. You talk about all these things we're not doing. I said, let's talk about it. Let's really talk about bullying, though, like not incidents, because a lot of people confuse incidents for bullying. Like, we need some repeated offenses. We need something that shows that there's a definite imbalance of power and that is targeted and et cetera. But I said, at the end of the day, a lot of things that we talk about are incidents, is what we talk about. And so we talked about the differences, and then I talked about all the different things we do, from PBIS to bringing in speakers to talk about bullying, to talking about the policies that we had on hand, the bullying and harassment form that people are able to fill out, that I receive maybe 3 a year, out of, this is my previous district, out of 800 students in the district, I would receive 3 a year. People actually filling out these forms and saying, so, and my thing is, we're talking about it. So we talked about all of this. And by the time we were done, she apologized for making the post. And I said, but listen, here's the thing. At the end of the day, your one post, it was a one post, your one post garnered 79 comments and over 340 likes.
Yeah.
So 340 likes, 79 comments, one post in a period of 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I said, so you see all the people that you reached out to and you impacted, rather than just picking up a phone and making a phone call to me. And I said, and I'm not telling you did anything wrong. You're not doing anything different than anybody else in this world's doing. Yeah. But this is the power of social media. And she goes, well, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to turn around and I'm going to post a positive about it, and it's going to fix it. And I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to post a positive. Positives are not nearly as popular as negatives. So people are going to hop online. They're going to see it. You're going to end up with a total of like maybe 15 likes, maybe one comment, and you're going to be done. And she goes, that's not true. And I said, okay. I said, I really hope it's not. But I said, I'll be interested to see how it ends up. And so before you know it, she posted one positive thing, had about 12 likes, one comment. She must not have been satisfied, because about an hour later, she posted another positive. Then she posted another positive. Then she posted another positive, to the point where like people were calling me and saying, did you talk to her? Because she's been posting like 9 positives now. Okay. And what's hilarious is what I had estimated would happen was 100% true. She did not, the combined total, she ended up having like 9 positives over like a 10-hour period. And the 9 positives maybe garnered total 40 likes and 2 comments.
Yeah.
Out of 9 postings. One posting, 350 likes, 79 comments, 9 postings, fraction of that.
Yeah. And
so, but I tell people all the time, listen, if nothing else, I changed one person's perspective, and hopefully her post changed another person's perspective. But we in education have too often said, oh, we can't get involved with that, or we can't correct people, because we're supposed to be, kind of these professionals that are supposed to sit here and essentially take it, and and we know that when things are happening, we can't say our story, we can't tell our voice. And I said, that's not true at all.
Like, who said that? I want to know, like, who I want to have a long leisurely lunch with whoever started this rumor and made us all believe it, because it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, and you just sit here and you just say, you know what? I'm not going to take it, but it doesn't mean I'm going to do anything that's going to discredit my profession or our school district. I'm going to come in from an angle of, you know what? You have a misunderstanding. Let's try to solve that. Let's talk about it. Let's go face to face or over the phone or whatever it may be, and let's have a conversation about it, and let's decide, but we can't sit here anymore and just sit back and take it. We're doing it too long, and people are just beating us up, and we're losing. We are absolutely losing. We also can't take to the streets with pitchforks and flames and try to bash down all these people. We can't do it either. We have to address it in a way that's telling our story, but doing it head on a little bit, like no more passive, no passive aggressive, just head on in a professional manner. I've had several times where there was a misconception in the community, and as a school, we would put something out. We're running a bond right now, and I want to make sure there's some misconceptions about what the bond is. So I created a video to post online of me talking to the community, just like you and I are talking now, and say, listen, people, like, here's the scenario. I don't like taxes either, but I also know that we are a growing community and we can't continue to grow without your money. Like that's,
Yeah.
there's no other way. If somebody else has a great way to do it, please step up and let me know.
Mhm.
But until otherwise, this is the only way we found. But being able to be real and be authentic with people and being able to say like, listen, I am available, I'm approachable. But at the end of the day, if what you're saying is not true, we can't stand for it,
Yeah.
So it's just it's very interesting. But I'm finding more and more superintendents who are starting to or just educators in general who are starting to stand up. But I also know of educators who, when they've tried to do this in the past, people have kind of slapped them down a little bit. There's a fine line between standing up for your profession and your role and your school and everything else, and then going overboard and becoming kind of offensive. Like
Yeah.
we can do it and we can be professional about it. There's nothing unprofessional about the stories that I've told you today. But they handle it straight on. It's a phone call. It's, they can choose not to talk with me. They can choose not to take my phone call, so, but at the end of the day, they do. And I'll find that I think if people were a little more courageous, I think they would find more and more people willing to do that, taking the phone call and having the conversation.
So that first step towards building a bridge is courage, then. That it really is.
Absolutely.
Just you know what, the easier thing to do is, you know what, I'm just not going to feed that troll. I'm just going to let it lie and move on, put my head down and do my work. But perhaps the more effective long-term options for us building a bridge to each other again as a community is to make some attempt to repair that harm. And one way to do that is say, you know what, you're posting this stuff on Facebook. I happen to know that it isn't true because I walk these schools every day. Let's talk. And I'll bet you that most people who are posting things that are less than true about your schools on Facebook or other places might not be expecting that the superintendent is going to be giving them a call and give them an opportunity to have that conversation.
It shocks them when they're like, oh.
Yeah. And I guess I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just talking a bit more about when you have those conversations, has that led to, I would imagine a lot of them probably might be just sort of those one and done things where we have that one phone call and the person perhaps chooses not to engage again. Has it ever worked out that perhaps you end up having a better, ally for your schools because of those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I've only had, I've only had one conversation that I could think of as somebody called, and again, it was a social media thing where I called them about social media. It was funny because we ended up having the whole conversation. They agreed, at the end of the day, they're like, absolutely. Because in my opinion, the downfall of society right now is social media. I mean, that it really is. It's your ability to go online and comment and say whatever you want to say to whoever you want to say it to with little to no repercussion. And so we had this conversation about it and how we need to be teaching our students how to step up and have these conversations face to face, and we need to deal with conflict and everything and not over social media. And she's like, absolutely, I agree. And then about 3 hours later, she turned around and posted something else on social media about the school. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you didn't I didn't get that at all. But I mean, that was like and it wasn't even necessarily against what we had talked about. It's like, she just didn't get the lesson, So, yeah. But for the most part, every other conversation I've had, whether it's in person or otherwise, is met with that same kind of response. In fact, I've done things face to face where, if I'm at a ball game and I'm standing there and a parent comes up and they want to sit there and complain, and I've just looked at them and be like, listen, here, at the end of the day, every conversation I have with you is a negative conversation. And so until you can come back to me and tell me one or two positive things that we do at the school to help your children and to help, then I'm gonna refrain from having a conversation with you. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of really bold. I mean, I did it just in the same voice that I talked right now. Mm-hmm. And I said, but I'd really like to have that conversation with you. I said, I just got to know that we are doing something well, something right. And that guy turned around about a week later and called and said, you know what, I thought about it. And he's like, you're 100% right. And I didn't know how that was going to go. Like, I kind of expected this particular individual to blow up at me. And he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, you're right. He's like, I spend too much time in the negative. And anyway, so he ended up being a huge ally. In fact, I invited him to be on one of our advisory committees, after the fact, because, his complaints weren't without merit. It just, they weren't taking the positive route either, So, I've told people before, like, you don't be afraid to kind of do those types of things in a professional, lighthearted manner. But, if you can do it and control your temper and be able to stay neutral when you're doing it, I mean, that's very important. But at some point, if nobody else is going to stand up for us, we have to.
Yeah. And what you're talking about here isn't like creating some sort of boundary with, like an electric fence and razor wire and guard towers with armed guards. It is really is more like, here is this wooden fence with a wide open wooden gate. Come and knock on that door anytime. But there's
Absolutely.
some things
Anytime.
that if you can't do, we can't have these conversations like normal, respectful people, because good manners would dictate that you wouldn't go up to somebody just to tell them all the things you don't like about them. It's like, if you got some feedback, you're going to also have to share something that's going well. That's just kind of good manners. And so what you're talking about is just setting those healthy boundaries around, you know what? I'm not particularly inclined to take a whole bunch of abuse at this ball game for our students that's going on right now. But I am happy to listen to your concerns. What I'm going to need you to do is also acknowledge that we're doing some good things for kids here. And I'd like you to take a look at some of those. And then the results of setting that healthy boundary is you got a great advisory council member out of it. Like, you've got somebody, who's got the energy to actually advise and share what might not be going 100% great. But now has built some skills around doing that in a more helpful way. And it never would have happened if we had simply said, let's just be polite and smile and nod until the energy's gone. And that seems to be what we're trained to do implicitly somehow as school leaders, is perhaps not have some of those healthy boundaries and not have those courage to not be able to have that courage to set it. Why do you think that might be? Is there something about like your circumstance, your situation, or just you that makes it easier for you to do that? And that might be different than maybe other leaders that you've seen?
I would say a lot of people, might look at me and be like, "Oh, you're confrontational." I don't know that I'm confrontational as much as, I'm very passionate about what we do, and I think too often, I grew up with a dad as a superintendent, and I would watch him take that verbal abuse, or that back then was online abuse, but the paper abuse, letter to the editor. I'd watch him in meetings, just sit there and take it. And I think it used to be kind of this perception of we as public educators, that is just our role, that we just basically have to sit there and take it. And I think by watching that and growing up with that, I kind of realized, like, one, I don't want to be in education at all. I ended up in education. And so if I was going to go into education and I was going to take on an administrative or a leadership role, that I would absolutely be professional, but at the end of the day, if there's something that's against, the foundation of which we are in education, like, I'm going to be a voice for it, and I'm going to stand up for it in a very professional way. And so, but I'll tell you that the first time you do it, the first time you pick up that phone and call somebody who made a Facebook post, it is a very, it's a very scary step to take, and it just takes that one phone call, and then you can do another one, and then you can have a face-to-face conversation, and then you can have, but at the end of the day, as long as you're being authentic and and it's okay to tell people no. Sometimes I feel like an educator, when you have somebody come up and be like, "Oh, I really want this to happen," I think our inclination is to get out of the conversation by saying, "You know what, I'll look into it and I'll let you know." Okay. Even if at the end of the day, it's not going to happen, but sometimes that false hope can kind of, kick here in the rear side, versus standing up and saying, "You know what, I appreciate your request. I understand why you're making the request. I could tell you right now that I'll go look into it and we can maybe do something, but we can't." Like, it's not going to be an option right now, if that's something in the future. So it's okay to tell people no and be able to say, but to do it in that manner and not say, "No, we're never going to do that," And I think that's where, through all of this, and we're having this conversation about, leadership and all these issues we're facing, across the country, and everything that we're trying to bring, whether it's a legislator or a parent or the crazy guy that's calling, about kids wearing dresses, or, CRT or anything like that. Like, at the end of the day, we have to be able to have these conversations as leaders in a professional, level-headed manner. We have to be able to steer people back to what's most important, and that's education. To be able to tell our story about what are all the positive things we're doing in education, and all the amazing things that our staff do for our students, like and why we're here to begin with. I think it's great to tell parents. I always end with telling parents, regardless of what the conversation is, listen, you and I are in the same team. I love your child. I want them to succeed. I want them to do well. And I'm going to do what I can to make that happen, and I think that's a great thing to end with. It's a great thing that I just tell our staff too when we get together. Like, listen, we're all on the same team. Like, this is what we do. I always start the year together as a team. I end the year as a team. It's the only time that I can have 500 plus staff members in a room at the same time. We use auditorium, but it's start the years together, end the year together. Not sure how maybe that's different. Maybe that doesn't really work in, Tucson, but it's a great practice, so, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, we just have to bring people back to these crazy things aren't happening, but let's talk about the things that are,
Yes.
So
yes, and we can't really do. And the main thing I'm getting from that is everybody would agree with that. These crazy things aren't happening. Can we please talk about the things that are? But what you've done is you've actually taken some real concrete steps to address it. That if someone in your school community wants to talk about whatever it is that's not happening, that you're going to bring them into a conversation. You're not going to try to exclude and marginalize. You're going to bring them in, and that may or may not work the first 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 times. However, it sounds like you've decided that choosing not to have the conversation has far greater risk than choosing to engage.
Yeah, for me, that's not an option. Like, I can't have, even if at the end of the conversation we agree to disagree, and I've used that term a ton. It's like, we're going to agree to disagree. At least we had the conversation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Brent, I really just thank you for being on the show today. And I really do just thank you for sharing your experience for the listeners. And what I love is that, I thought we were going to just talk about Iowa and what's neat about being a superintendent in a place like Iowa. And what's real clear is that what we had instead is your way of being exceptionally relational with your school community as the way of building that bridge back to each other again in a situation where we as leaders are often finding ourselves talking about things that are simply not true. Sometimes it's very small kinds of things. Sometimes it's really just, I can't even tell where this thing is coming from sometimes, but it seems to be causing us lots of angst here. And I guess the main thing I'm taking from you is you got to be courageous. Yeah, you have to be willing to lean into some discomfort. You have to be willing to actually have the conversation. And from time to time, you have to be willing to set some professional and healthy boundaries around what is and is not an appropriate time and place and manner in which to have a conversation. But would that be kind of a great way to paraphrase it a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, excellent. Well, listeners, I really hope you enjoyed our show, and I do hope you reach out to me or to Dr. Brent with your thoughts on our conversation. You can find Superintendent Brent Hoesing at brent.hoesing at lewiscentral.org. And you can always find me at www.tgseducationalconsulting.com. And if you're listening and are connecting to the show, and so just the authenticity and of leaning into some discomfort and having the conversations and making sure we engage with everyone in our school community without exception, be grateful for that like, or even better, comment below on the video. Until next time, though, I'm wishing all of us as many opportunities to be as generous with ourselves as we are with those we serve.